until I saw Evil Dead 2.
Dead by Dawn?
Dead by Dawn. It is a much crazier movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is much more unhinged and so much of the things that we talk about being very funny and abstract and silly about the first Evil Dead movie. It's like this one goes, character development. No, that's not what we're focusing on. We are focusing on pure insanity.
Right. I mean, we'll get into all that in a second.
Yeah. It reminds me, though, talking about like the crazy movies that we've seen and whatnot, a lot of the movies that we've seen we regard as perfect or classics or, they still hold up. They still have some scary elements to them. But I was given by Carly's parents as this surprise gift that was amazing. They got us tickets to go see comedian Patton Oswalt.
Yeah.
In Clearwater a couple days after Christmas. It was amazing. You and I
am very jealous.
Yeah, you and I love Patton Oswalt. Super funny as always. He's older. So there's a renewed sense of like irascibleness to his comedy. He's angry.
Right.
I'd be angry too if I was, like a Keebler elf because he's so strange. But he has this bit in this new stand-up that I'm laughing so fucking hard because we had just started this podcast. And, I thought about like waiting outside of the stage door and being like, Patton, you had this bit about John Carpenter's Halloween. Guest on the Third Channel podcast.
Yeah.
And then in my daydream, he was like, oh, you're the guys that do the Third Channel podcast and you're there now. And Carly's there and she's like, hey, I also, I made their logo. And he's like, I'm in. And he joins us for a discussion on Halloween. But the daydream didn't happen. His joke about...
Oh, no.
I know. His joke about Halloween is that his daughter is getting older and that she likes horror like he did when he was her age. And so she's like, hey, I want to watch John Carpenter's Halloween. A lot of my friends have seen it. A lot of my friends love it. It's very popular. There are newer ones that have come out. I really want to see it. He's like, no, absolutely not. That movie fucked me up when I was a kid. I remember that there is nudity in it. You can't watch it. And she's like, but all my friends have seen it. And he's like, that doesn't get to me. I don't care that your friends have seen it. That doesn't bother me. You don't get to see that. And she's like, but what? It'll get spoiled for me. And he's like, well, fuck, that gets me.
Yeah,
that bothers me.
That would suck.
So he's like, all right, we'll watch it together. And I'll watch it first and then we'll watch it together. And he's like, in my watch through alone, I remember the terror. I saw this movie in theaters. It's so fucking scary and he's unkillable. And it's just so scary. And then I watched it with my daughter and she thought it was the funniest fucking movie she's ever seen. And he's talking about how she's like, just fucking stab him again. Cut his fucking head off. And like she's screaming at the TV. And he's like, that's not, you don't get the point. It's art. And she's like, it's stupid. And the funniest part of it is his bit is that as Loomis is loomising over the balcony because he just shot Michael 6 times. And he's leaning over the balcony to look down to find the corpse of a now deceased Michael Myers.
Right.
And as the camera is pulling over the balcony, apparently Patton Oswalt's daughter is just like, hey, he's not going to fucking be there. He's going to be gone. And then Patton's so fucking mad. He's like, shut the fuck, why? And then the camera leans over and she apparently bursts into laughter so hard that she's like holding her head like a migraine. And she's like, I fucking knew it. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Hello, 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 all you ghouls and goblins, and welcome to the Third Channel Podcast,
where we delve into the woods and into the horror franchises you love from the perspectives of a lifelong horror fan
and a newbie to the genre who are both currently in a cabin. I'm PJ.
And I'm Derek.
And today, the only thing we're here to talk about in this cabin in the woods is horror. I love so much that these movies are cabin in the woods. Mm-hmm. And I love that movie as well, Cabin in the Woods by title. But like when I think of a movie, a horror movie about a cabin in the woods, it's funny because there is a movie with that title and I've never thought about Cabin in the Woods. I think about The Evil Dead.
Yeah, I mean, for good reason. They, kind of not probably originated it, but it was the best example of that for a long, long time.
I'm sure that Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin isn't the first person to ever play a guitar with a bow, like a violin bow. But when he did it, it was really fucking cool.
Yeah.
And it's a staple now. And Sam Raimi, he does it the first time. It's funny. It's crazy. It's great. And then he does it the second time. And this movie is absolutely insane.
Bonkers.
It is groovy. I told you, I watched it for the first time on my rewatch because this is another one of those movies where I've only ever seen it the one time, and we watched it, a year ago.
Yeah, a little over.
And so rewatching it was like seeing it again, new for the first time. I'd forgotten so much. And the first time I rewatched it, I told you that this discussion was going to be a bumpy one because it's like, I don't like this movie.
Right.
I don't care for it near as much as I like Evil Dead 1.
Right.
Or The Evil Dead.
Which I said we're going to fight on because Evil Dead 2 is probably my favorite of the bunch.
But we don't have to fight on it.
Oh.
Because I watched it again today and it clicked.
Oh,
and
okay.
I got it.
Yeah.
I get it.
I think that is probably... This franchise as a whole kind of operates like that.
Yeah.
Depending on when you see them and what order you see them and things like that,
Yeah.
it clicks for different people in different ways.
And I don't want to sound like I'm too heady. Let me explain what I mean by clicked. It's not, I didn't read a secret code. I didn't hold lemon juice under a candle so the invisible ink showed up. I get it in the fact that The Evil Dead is Sam Raimi makes his first movie with friends and he really enjoys making it and it's horror. And then this one is, hey, what could we have done with that first movie if we had a real production, a real budget? Oh, and also, let's go fucking nuts.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit what happens in the movie. We will put puppets into this goddamn movie and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
And it's a horror comedy. And it's fucking great.
That's the key.
I think this is probably one of my favorite horror movies. Like a black comedy, like a horror comedy. I think this is my favorite of them all. Having it click that Sam Raimi didn't try to make a horror, because when you watch it the first time, I think, and audience, feel free to agree or disagree with us, or with me, I guess. Watching it the first time, it feels like a swing and a miss. Mm-hmm. It feels like Sam is trying to make a horror movie and Bruce is sabotaging him. Bruce Campbell is like, no, I'm going to go cross-eyed.
Yeah, I'm going to cheese it up.
I have it in my notes, and we'll go over this more in detail. He goes cross-eyed 3 times in this movie. Like he screams himself cross-eyed.
That seems about right.
It's amazing. Back to The Evil Dead 2. Not The
The Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, they dropped the evil.
Evil Dead 2. And then in like marketing materials, it has a subtitle of Dead by Dawn, which is a line of dialogue that's spoken in the movie, but that's not what the movie is called, as far as I can tell.
What's funny is that Dead by Dawn is kind of like almost a trope now. Mm-hmm. It's like a horror saying. It's quoted a lot. I think there's a Family Guy bit where Peter's like, hey, this says Dead by Dawn. It's kind of exploded into something more. So it's a good subtitle.
Yeah. So yeah, like you were saying, it's basically the big budget version of The Evil Dead.
Right.
So Evil Dead 2 released March 13th of 1987 in the U.S.,
which from its original release is 6 years, and then from its theatrical release is 3 years.
Yeah.
Or 4 years.
And so the only other movie that Sam Raimi had directed between The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 was a movie called Crime Wave, which came out in 1985. It was like a comedy crime film co-written with the Coen brothers.
Okay.
And it was a both critical and commercial failure.
Which is sad because considering the Coen brothers and Sam Raimi, you'd think it would be a no-brainer.
But I mean, they're all kind of early in their career, and maybe it just wasn't what the people wanted or whatever.
What is it with like genius horror movie creators and making shitty cop movies in between? Because Assault on Precinct 13, we watched a bunch of Carpenter movies a long time ago, and that was the movie where it was like, I'm having a hard time getting through this.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is like that is as close to like a zombie film that Carpenter's ever made.
Yeah, it follows the rubric.
Yeah,
it's just also a bunch of crazy looking extras, getting squibbed.
Exactly. And then after the failure of Crime Wave, that's when Raimi and their producer Robert Tappert and Bruce Campbell, basically at the insistence of Irvin Shapiro, who was like their publicist. He was the guy who got them into the Cannes Film Festival.
Right. The Cannes Film Festival.
Right. So he insisted that that's what they should work on next. And what's funny is like they had already kind of come up with the idea for a sequel while making the original film. And they had written a couple different things, but Raimi had settled on an idea where Ash was sucked through a time portal to the Middle Ages and that he would encounter more Deadites there. And
which, for the record, and I'm going to lean in real close, that's fucking insane.
Yeah.
That was a crazy decision.
That was the immediate, that's the sequel to The Evil Dead.
But that's why I love this, because that's insane. It makes no fucking sense, and it makes it so much better.
Yeah, it's I don't know, just all part of the insane production of this.
Does Ash get sucked back through time? You'll find out at some point when we talk about it, but the answer is yes.
Spoilers. Shapiro, he loved the idea, and so he took out advertisements in like trade magazines to promote the project, calling it Evil Dead 2, Evil Dead in the Army of Darkness in like 1984. And like Universal Pictures and 20th Century Fox, like the big ones, like passed on it.
Of course.
And so they shelved it, and that's when they made Crime Wave. And then failed. Okay, now let's actually hammer down and figure out what's the sequel to The Evil Dead, because that worked. Let's do it again.
Do you know what the sequel is? The same movie, retold, kind of different.
Yeah. Which we'll get to in just a second.
It's kind of different.
Stephen King comes back into play again. He was a big fan of the original. And so...
Which I love that fact so much.
Like, he saw it. And I mean, it really helped them get that first movie made.
Good.
Because he... I think the quote is, and they use it on the poster and things, is like, the most original horror film in decades or something like that.
That's great.
And so that's... I mean, when you got Stephen King on your side, that's really all you needed. But he brought it to the attention of producer Dino De Laurentiis. And Dino De Laurentiis is a movie producer, or was a movie producer. And Stephen King was working with him at this time to do his directorial debut, which was Maximum Overdrive, which is based on a short story of his called Trucks. Won't go into that for now. But Dino had asked Raimi if he wanted to adapt Stephen King's Thinner, which is another novel of Stephen King's, and Raimi turned that down. But Dino, they kept in touch. And so Dino was like, okay, well, Stephen King is saying, like, I should check out your stuff. And he agreed to finance the project of Evil Dead 2 at a considerable larger budget from the original. And, you know, the main thing that he asked for was, even though Raimi's idea was to put him in the Middle Ages, Dino was more like, well, no, can we do a movie that's similar to the first film?
Yeah. Give the people what they're expecting, not something that is
right.
objectively an insane thing to do.
And just to give you an idea of like what Dino De Laurentiis, because that'll be a name that'll probably pop up again in our conversations for other movies, because he's produced or helped produce Halloween 2 and 3, Amityville Horror 2 and 3. He worked on a lot of Stephen King adaptations. The Dead Zone, Firestarter, Maximum Overdrive, Silver Bullet, Cat's Eye, Sometimes they come back.
You said Cat's Eye. Is Cat's Eye, are those two titles?
Cat's Eye is...
Like he worked on Cats?
No. He did not work on Cats.
Okay, that's good.
As far as I'm aware.
Okay. That's the scariest movie. I won't watch it. It's too scary for me. I've seen that trailer.
Too spooky for me. He was the producer on David Lynch's Dune. He worked on Blue Velvet. And then he was also the producer on like all of the major Hannibal films, like Hannibal the Cannibal films, except for Silence of the Lambs.
So like Hannibal,
Hannibal Rising, Red Dragon, and Manhunter, I believe is the other one.
Red Dragon and Hannibal are the only two that are worth watching, by the way. Yeah. I know we're not talking about those movies, but those are the good ones.
We'll get to them eventually, I'm sure.
By the way, pin on David Lynch's Dune, because I have a note about David Lynch's Dune that I took for this movie. So I'm excited to get to that.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening, remember last week we said that we pin things. So you too get to wait in anticipatory paroxysms of anticipation as you wait for me to explain what the pin is about David Lynch's Dune. Please, Derek, continue.
Can't wait, but I'm going to go on.
Yeah, please do.
Like in the original film, this one had a ton of like censorship difficulties just because of the amount of violence and gore and blood. Because at the time that was a big deal. We see far worse things now, and that gets through just fine. But like at the time, it was like, oh no, that's too much. Literally, that's too much blood. X rating, which basically just the film is not going to be released, and if it is, it's not going to be made. It's not going to make any money. So. Because Dino De Laurentiis and his entertainment group was members of the MPAA, Raimi was contractually obligated to deliver them a film that would be rated R. And so he was even looking at it. The guy in charge of that with the entertainment group was like, yeah, you're not going to pass. You're going to get an X. I know that. And if we wanted to get it down to an R rating, we'd have to cut it down to like a 62-minute long movie, which the movie itself is like not that long now. Yeah. It's like 85 minutes or something.
Yeah.
But it's like, like 30 minutes would have to be chopped out of it. And you're going to ruin both Raimi's vision and the audience's enjoyment of this film. And so what Dino De Laurentiis did is that they created a like shill company called Rosebud Entertainment or Rosebud Releasing Corporation.
Which even on Prime, when you stream this fucking movie, Rosebud pops up at the beginning.
Yeah. I guess it's a real production company now, but it literally was just created for this. Sam Raimi created the storyboard for that rose like blooming that is used for that logo because it's a stop motion rose, completely made up. Just to do this. Other key things here that I just will probably touch on more later on, but it features stop motion animation and prosthetic makeup effects created by Mark Strostrom or Shothstrom. Could be pronouncing that wrong because I can't speak tonight for whatever reason.
That's fine.
But he worked on A Nightmare on Elm Street's 1, 2, 3. He did work on Videodrome, From Beyond, and Prince of Darkness.
Oh, okay.
So he's worked, on several.
The Nightmare things. Specifically is you can kind of see the parallel. It's really good at making like putrid skin putrid because that's something that is all over this movie is like bloat and rot and like nasty pulled skin. Some of it's a little rubber monstery.
Yeah,
but
at times.
But typically it's in this film. I like the makeup in this movie. Needless to say, I like the makeup in this movie a million times more.
That is
because that's something I've already gotten heat for. Is my saying I hate the makeup in Evil Dead 1.
Well, and I was going to ask you about this one, so I'm glad to hear that you do approve.
Yeah. Please give us feedback because I can take it, even if it's like, hey, because I got no lie, I got called a smooth brain for my take on not liking which is fine. My brain is smooth. My thoughts slide right off of my smooth ass brain. It doesn't bother me. They don't get caught in the wrinkles. I'm easy. I'm breezy.
Yeah.
I'm beautiful. I'm PJ from the Third Channel Podcast. Oh, God.
The other people on that team, that effects team, are maybe names that you've heard. Greg Nicotero.
Yes.
Robert Kurtzman
I'm less familiar.
and Howard Berger. Or Berger. Don't know how you pronounce it.
Berger?
Yeah.
It's probably Berger.
So the reason that I say all three of those names together is that they would go on to create the K&B. So K for Kurtzman, N for Nicotero, B for Berger, EFX Group. So they would go on to do that later after this, but this was kind of them cutting their teeth.
Cool.
And those are all big names. I mean, they've worked on, a ton of things. Their biggest stuff is Greg Nicotero. I mean, he does all the effects or has done all the effects for The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
That's
Really amazing stuff.
but he also, he does stuff as far back as like George A. Romero's Day of the Dead. That's where he kind of got his start. Kurtzman, he has worked on A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 5. He did stuff. They've all worked on Halloween 5. So yeah, and then they also had a returning artist from Within the Woods, The Evil Dead, now this, and he'll go on to work on Army of Darkness in Tom Sullivan. But yes, I do agree. The effects are, such an improvement, but that's what happens whenever you have like actual artists doing,
Actual work instead of a guy going, oh, I don't fucking know, put more makeup on it.
Yeah. I just now realized in this moment that I've like jumped ahead from how I normally start this thing. And so we'll just quickly go through. Evil Dead 2, I already said, released March 13th of 1987. Directed by Sam Raimi, written by Sam Raimi and Scott Spiegel, friend of theirs, longtime friend of Sam Raimi's. Still produced by Robert Tappert. And then the cinematography on this one is done by Peter Deming. And he actually worked on Scream 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
He was the cinematographer for that. But then he's also worked with David Lynch on some things. He cinematography for Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive. He worked with Raimi again on Drag Me to Hell and Oz the Great and Powerful, I think is the name of that movie. And then he also was the DP on Cabin in the Woods.
It's so funny.
So, budget for this one, we already kind of mentioned that, Dino De Laurentiis got us a much bigger budget for this one.
The last one I remember being $375,000 because I made the joke that it should have been $375.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume 3 times that at around $900,000 to $1 million is my guess.
$3.5 million.
Okay. All right.
With a box office takeaway as $5.9 million. So
okay.
They nearly doubled what they spent.
That's good.
So yeah, not like, gangbusters, the biggest thing in the world, but definitely enough to continue this franchise. And these are movies that I think if the Scream franchise was like the perfect example of slashers, these are like the perfect example for us to start talking about like cult classics. Yeah. Because there are things that like maybe they didn't take off immediately, but they have a huge following now because it just, people tell people about it and you love it.
Well, you love it, but also there's enough of it that has reached that zeitgeist. There's enough of it that chewed its way from being a cult classic to something that you go, oh, that's the one where they say Dead by Dawn, or oh, that's the one where he says boomstick or groovy, or this is the one with, the guy with the chainsaw hand.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah, and it's on the poster, him with the chainsaw hand. And it's like, it is a cult classic. It is something that kind of got lost in the reeds, I'm sure, of all of these different franchises. But I think it's got longevity because I don't think there were any expectations to make this. I don't think the second one, you make the second, you have the giant explosion of Halloween. Michael's got to come back. The fervor to have Michael Myers return and to have that ending be satisfied in some way led John Carpenter to like hate the franchise, hate the character. He drank his way through the entire making of that second movie. Wes Craven talks about how, after making the first movie of Nightmare on Elm Street, it's like, do you want to make the second? He's like, no, because I know what I would want to do isn't going to be done, and I know I'm going to have a hard time with it. And this one just happened to be somebody liked Sam's vision enough that he was able to make what he wanted. But as a result of that, it gets buried underneath, all of the other things that are releasing.
Yeah. I think it's strange that we've started with 2 franchises where like the same director does like multiple entries.
Yeah, because that's not typical. No, it's definitely not. Like, some of them will have, like, Sean Cunningham has some hand in most of Friday the 13th.
Yeah, his name's always attached in some way, and he has a little bit more in, I think, the Final Friday. But go ahead.
But, like, you know, we'll bring up Halloween again, and I think for those of you listening, everything that is horror related ties back in some way to Halloween. Either it's before it and Halloween takes inspiration from it, or it's, you know, it's coming out after and Halloween is an inspiration for it.
Absolutely.
And I think Evil Dead is similar in a different kind of way, because it's, you know, Evil Dead is like Halloween in the sense that Halloween is this is the perfect slasher movie. This has everything that you want. Beat for beat, it's perfect. It's suspenseful. It has enough blood for the time that it was released in. It can still frighten you, you know, despite what Patton Oswalt's daughter might
unless
say.
Unless you're Patton's daughter.
Right. And this one is like, this will still gross you out. It will still, a little bit of how the sausage is made. You know, we talked about what clip we wanted to use to play for this film, to give people kind of a palette of what the movie is like, kind of a soundbite. And I'm sitting in the house alone, and I plugged my phone into the board to record that soundbite, and I clicked play, and the noise of like the clip terrified me, because even after all of this time and how silly this movie can be, it is also horror. And it serves as a rubric of like, you can stretch the boundaries however far you want, as long as you have a cohesive vision and as long as you have a good story and something scary, it will last.
We are the things that were and shall be again. Stance of the book. We want what is yours. Life. Dead by dawn.
Dead by dawn.
Dead by dawn. Dead by dawn.
Dead by dawn.
Dead by dawn. Dead by dawn. Dead by dawn.
As she like bangs from the cellar and her face is rotten, and I took a note of this. It's his mask. What's the character's name?
Ed.
His transformation into a deadite as he sits and floats. Again, rules out the window. Don't know why it's him. There's no real answer as to why that is.
Yeah, he gets attacked by Henrietta, I guess, and thrown up against the wall. And that's the only explanation.
Yeah, they touched him.
Yeah.
And it just decided to do it.
But then they've done that plenty to Ash and other people, and nothing happens.
Yeah, and we'll get more into that. But like the prosthetic of his face, which is just a mask, I'm sure, but it's like, it's the rows of teeth.
Yeah.
It's so effective. And like, he flies over and like he bites the female lead's head and like tears scalp away. And it's like, yeah, that's frightening. That's frightening visual, but it's not like anything else.
Right.
It's not like your traditional zombie movie. It's not like even like Demone, where the zombies are demonic.
That's the closest example that I have for that.
And it's still even so far away. There's nothing like these movies. And, you know, there's nothing like Scream, because Scream is like everything on purpose. It is intentionally imbibing all of these different things. Meanwhile, Evil Dead is, people have emulated it now, but at the time, it is the most, Stephen King, it is the most original horror movie in decades, because and that's, I think, why it punches up.
Yeah, I completely agree there. Do we want to
read a plot synopsis?
Yeah.
I didn't read this beforehand. Normally I do, to be prepared, but I thought it'd be more fun to just go into it blind. Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Ash Williams, the lone survivor of an earlier onslaught of flesh-possessing spirits, holes up in a cabin with a group of strangers while the demons continue their attack. Now that's good, but it's also kind of wrong, because this movie reestablishes the story for the first one. And in a way where it's like, well, he isn't the sole survivor of a demon attack. Like, unless you count like him showing up and the newly cast love interest attacks him, But it's like, if he's the sole survivor, it's only because there were only the two of them there.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, either way, he's still the sole survivor.
I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Is, for the record, this movie is strange in that it is both a direct sequel and it also overwrites the original.
Yeah. So the reason for that is both Raimi, because this is a question that comes up all the time. And Raimi and Campbell have both stated that Evil Dead 2 was intended as a direct sequel. It's not a remake of the original, but the problem is that I guess enough time had passed that they couldn't make a sequel where how do you get Ash back to the cabin? After the events of the first movie, there's no way that he would ever go back there again.
Right.
So how do you make a movie that's like the first one? So they have to retell the events of the first movie so that we, the audience, know that all happened. But because it's a different production company, they don't have the rights to use the footage from the first film. So they have to reshoot, and they tell like an abbreviated version of the events of the first film.
Well, kind of.
Yeah, because they kind of rewrite history because they're like, okay, let's boil it down to its simplest terms.
Just him and Linda. Cheryl, his sister, is gone.
Yeah.
The friends of theirs are gone.
Not mentioned, not brought up
What
at
is it,
all.
Scotty and Sarah?
Scotty and Shelley.
Shelley. Yeah, the two S names. Yeah, they're gone. It's the two of them. And one of the notes that I took in rewatching this movie is just the words Looney Tunes tunnel. Because it starts with them driving, and it's like it looks like a vista painted on a wall.
Yeah.
And for a second, it's like, is this a Roger Rabbit bit? Because I hadn't seen it in so long. But yeah, I love that opening shot.
Yeah.
Oh, really quickly, as we begin to set up the beginning of this, in the beginning, the movie re-explains the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
Re-explains the Kandarian and Sumerian, BS that they just kind of invented for this. But the Necronomicon is like stop motiony and it like comes alive. And this is my note. This is my
Animated
pin.
by Tom Sullivan, if I'm not mistaken.
This is my pin for David Lynch.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote the Necronomicon in the beginning looks like the David Lynch's Dune version of the monstrous book of monsters from Harry Potter. And I'll expand on that.
Okay.
So David Lynch's Dune is ambitious and wild because there's a bunch of future technology things that he's trying to create, but very early into special effects. And so it looks a little strange. And then obviously the new Dune movies do all of that stuff with ease because digital technology is fucking nuts now. So this is like, you watch Harry Potter and you've got the monster book and it like chews things and it runs around and it's like an animated prop and it's really amazing. But this is like, if they made that movie in the same way where it's way earlier and they're making, I think that's Prisoner of Azkaban, and they're making it, well, fuck, let's stop motion the book.
That would be how you had to do it.
So that's my pin for David Lynch.
Nice. That'll come back into play next week.
Okay, good.
The thing that I like here is, other than the explanation of like, inked in human blood, wrapped in human skin again, is that it throws out the fact of the book disappeared in the year 1300 AD. That will again come into play later. In that retelling of the recap of the first movie, you get the introduction of all the things that you need: the car, the bridge, the cabin, the necklace, the book, the tape recorder. You see the camera smashed through the window. Linda gets possessed.
How like the evil force moves about. Yeah, we get like hey, by the way, it does these things. It smashes trees and it makes smoke happen.
Yeah, and it runs, not very long, a couple minutes. And apparently, and this is what I got from one of the commentaries, was the magnifying glass necklace was originally in the first film. They had planned this or written a scene where it was going to catch the light and start catching the book on fire. And that's how Ash was going to realize, oh, fire is the thing. If I burn the book, I can beat the Deadites. And then that just never got into the actual thing. So that's why it's a magnifying glass necklace in the first place.
For the record, that would have been way better
Yeah.
than him using it as a lasso to get the book closer just to throw it into the fire.
Yeah.
While they beat him with clubs. The silliest scene in the whole first movie. Just possess him.
Yeah.
Just possess him. No, they're like, you know what? We don't fucking like this guy. We're going to beat him with yardsticks.
And then finally, the camera crashes into Ash's face, which is the last shot of the Evil Dead. And then he goes flying through the air.
Face acting the fuck out of, and like, it looks like a music video for like a Blur song.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And he's apparently, the way that they shot that is he's on this like rig. And Sam Raimi is the one controlling it, because I think we said this in the first one, but I cannot stress enough how much these movies are just Sam Raimi
fucking with Bruce Campbell.
like picking on his friend Bruce Campbell. Like, how can I cover him in awful things, or hit him in the face with branches, or spin him around on this giant rig?
Again, Bruce Campbell, supporting star of Burn Notice, USA's Burn Notice.
And so, Sam Raimi is just having a ball, just spinning him at random one way or the other. And then he smashes into a tree, crashes down into a puddle.
And the puddle scene is amazing. It's amazing because he's face down and it's bubbles and it's bubbles and it's bubbles. And then he lifts his face and it's horrific. It's like, oh shit, they got him. They finally got him.
He appears to be a deadite.
Yeah.
He has the white out eyes. His face is all like sunken in like
his teeth have like more space in between them. It's like kind of yucky.
And then the sun comes up, and so he just reverts back. And, I guess it kind of plays into the whole idea of like Dead by Dawn, and, the evil only comes out at night, or really only has power, like bad power at night.
Yeah. This is also the first example of Bruce Campbell as Ash being cross-eyed. Because it's like they do this amazing thing where, and this whole movie is basically this. They do amazing things to silly shit, to amazing things to silly shit. And this is the perfect example. He's face down in that puddle for a long time.
A long time.
Bubbles are coming up. It's like 10 plus seconds. His head rips up. An amazing makeup effect. He's screaming. It looks terrifying. Our hero is possessed. And then the sun comes up and it closes in on his eye. And they have done this amazing effect where like the white looks like a liquid that drains out of his eyes. All amazing. And then it cuts to Bruce Campbell, who goes cross-eyed. He's like, and his eyes are fucking crossed. Like a moron, and he just overacts the fuck out of it. And that's the whole movie. It's a roller coaster of, is this an amazing horror movie about demon possession, or is this fucking Looney Tunes?
It's a little of both.
I love it. It's amazing. It's a ping pong game.
It's a fine line.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say Sam Raimi walks it every day of his life.
Sam Raimi owns a house on both sides of the fence.
Yes.
Yeah.
They do this insane shot of him once he's flipped back over and he's not a deadite anymore. He like passes out for a second, and the camera is close up on his face, and then it does this spin upwards it's looking down at him, but it spins up into the treetops. Just I don't know what the rig looks like to do that, like on a crane or on a jib or something, but I don't know how it's done the way that the camera spins around.
We mentioned this last week, but it's just another example of the most boring shot in the world is the transition in geography, is going from your character to a detail. Usually it's the camera blinks and it's looking somewhere else, or it's a slow pan, or if it's an action shot, it's a fast pan. To do things like the spin or the spiral, or to change your geography so that it feels weightless. It's just, it makes Sam Raimi, it makes him above. Yeah, it makes him one of like the Mount Rushmore of vision and substance over quality and compromise. It's, I know what I'm doing. I know what I want it to look like. I don't want any of my shots to be boring. I know exactly how this is going to flow. And he's just, this movie with its, even with its heightened production, it's like all of those things that we love about the cinematography and the direction of that first movie, he just continues doing it. And it's great. I love it.
Yeah. And some of that does come from like where they were shooting. So Dino De Laurentiis, his company has like, huge sets that he could play on, or huge swaths of land that they could have built a cabin on and done that. But Raimi and them were like, actually, we'd like to shoot it over here in Wadesboro, North Carolina, and then some of it was shot in Detroit, but mostly it was shot in Wadesboro. And it was actually on the same property that portions of The Color Purple was shot, the Steven Spielberg film.
Okay.
The outside of the cabin was built there, and the inside of the cabin. So it's two completely different sets. The outside of the cabin is built on this, wooded property. And so any of the outside shots is all from there. Any of the interior is a built set. It's a 2-story set so that they could put the cameras and stuff up and shoot down. That's built in like a school gymnasium nearby. And so that means that anytime that you see characters cross from inside to outside or outside to inside, shot completely different places.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But the reason that they were like, yeah, we'd actually like to go over here and not be on your property is because Raimi feared if they were that close, there'd be more meddling with the producers and things like that, and they wouldn't get their way all the time.
Yeah.
So they were like, if we're further away, they're not going to see what we're doing.
Yeah. I guess you don't realize when you're not really paying attention, when that's not something you think about. That's crazy to think about how many productions have to go, oh no, all of this stuff we're filming in a different location. So let's just, pick up all this stuff and then we'll get that stuff on another day. But there's a lot of crossing the threshold in this movie. A lot, which is funny because we complain, not really a complaint, but it's an observation about the first one where it's, do you see this cabin? That's it. This one, they move about a bit more. They cut to other people. There's
there's a
things.
couple, shots and locations that are outside of there.
We see an airport.
We do.
It's a building with lights.
Yeah.
In The Evil Dead? What the fuck? That's crazy.
It's groundbreaking.
Yeah.
No, what's funny you say that is that that affected the way that they shot it. The first 2-3 weeks of shooting was all of the nighttime external cabin shots.
Sure.
But that meant that they didn't know, because of the way that Sam Raimi covers Bruce Campbell in nastiness and blood and guts and everything else, they didn't know what he was going to look like at any given time in the movie. So they're just having to put cuts on his face and drench him in things and then just go, okay, yeah, I guess we'll just try and make that match later.
There's an old story that Mark Hamill tells about Star Wars A New Hope where they go to the trash compactor and Mark Hamill is new movie actor. He's not worked on a lot. And he looks to Harrison Ford and he goes, well, we were just in the trash compactor. It's covered in water and trash. Shouldn't my hair be mucky and gucked up? Apparently Harrison Ford's response was, listen, kid, if they're paying attention to your hair, we fucked up. Or, I'm paraphrasing, but if you're paying attention with as much effort as Bruce Campbell puts out in every frame of this film that he is in, if you're paying attention to where the cuts on his face are, you're wrong. You have made an error. That's not what this movie is. This movie is, look at how many times Bruce Campbell's teeth are exposed completely because he has contorted his face like an insane person.
Yeah, he loses his mind here in just a minute. This is also where we get... he finds the bridge is broken.
Again, love that scene. Love that set piece.
Yep. Matte painting. It's part miniature. It's part actual set.
And it's better lit this time, so you get a lot more detail. And again, it looks like that hand. It looks like something like the steel girders have broken into something that resembles almost like teeth. It's really good. It's a good set piece. I don't know why that sticks with me in both of these movies.
It's just effective. It's an effective
this is your only way out, and now you can't go.
Yeah.
And the only way to get out is through the woods. And historically with these movies, it's a bad fucking idea.
Bad idea. That's also where the evil force then kind of picks up again and just starts chasing him. Ash hops back in the Delta, puts it in reverse. He runs back. He drives as fast as he can. And it is the most overcranked high-speed chase through these trees.
What's funny is that because a lot of 90s cinematography is like that. It's tilted angles. It's super quick. It moves around. It follows things very close. It's a lot of close-ups on the face. And what's funny is that the only example of that I can think of before it became popular in the 90s is, the word for that, somebody who does things a decade before they become the popular option, is a visionary. And As we talk about these movies, by the way, and this is my favorite part of the little social experiment of the Third Channel, as we sit and talk about this stuff, I learn to love these things much more than I ever would had I just seen them on my own.
Yeah.
Like watching them for the purpose of watching them with analysis in mind is like, Sam Raimi is an easy director to go like, yeah, he's good. He made Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man 2. You know, the Doc Ock scene is great. And obviously, you know, he's good at horror. It's easy to just kind of write him off. But as we sit and talk about it, it's like, yeah, no, the things he did in these shitty, silly movies paved the way for people to create different things because that's you break some ground.
Ash bursts through the windshield at some point. And then one of my favorite shots here is that the force itself that's been chasing him bursts through the back of the back windshield of the car. And that was done by putting like the camera was on like a rig with like a 30-foot pole, like a metal pole.
With like
and
a
it
spike
just like,
or something?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it just like broke through. And
That's awesome.
Because then the camera continues. It's not like it smashes the glass and stops right there. It continues out the front of the car. So they had to be able to break the back glass and then continue to take the camera through.
It's like 50% of the effects of this movie are typical makeup, gore, blood. And then the other 50% are like, well, we have to make the camera seem like it's a thing, like it's alive, but not in any way like a human would behave. So what do we nail this fucking camera to? I like our discussion last week about the first episode or the first movie in this installment that they would just strap the camera to a plank of wood and run it through the woods. It's like, that's fucking wild.
Yeah. And that shaky cam is what they chase Bruce all the way through the house, or Ash all the way through the house. And then he like sneaks. I mean, we see every single room in that house. He bursts through walls. He bursts through doors. He runs through this whole like not finished section of this wall and then comes back out and the force like stops in the living room and like looks to the right and looks to the left and has like lost him somehow in the chase. And then it just backs out the front door and out into the woods. And then he's revealed to be in the cellar.
Again, no rules.
Not.
Speaking of the cellar, if we are looking past the revisionism of this film, and we're looking at like it's supposed to be a direct sequel, all the stuff shot for the beginning of the movie, Linda and everything, it's all just revisionist to kind of quickly tell the events of the first movie.
Yeah.
If we take that literally from the director, when Ash goes down into the cellar the first time and we see like the Hills Have Eyes poster and everything, that woman is under their feet
Yeah.
just the whole time.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought that's one of the first things I thought of is like because the recording, and I'm jumping ahead a bit, but the recording is like, my wife Harriet is dead. I've buried her under the earthen floor of the fruit cellar, and it's like they spend a lot of time down there in the first movie. That means she's just sitting there,
Just hanging out.
You're dead by dawn eventually. Not this dawn, but the next one, dead meat. And it's just, I thought about how strange that must have been to be the actress. And then like, if you watch the first two, it's like, so wait, was like,
What was I doing?
just dead down there the whole time?
Maybe. Well, no, because she was already possessed. Yeah, I don't know.
Because she's the first victim.
Yeah.
Is the two of them go to the cabin. They read from the book. Things begin to happen. And, you know, the tapes tell us that she became possessed, tries to kill her husband. So he fucking kills her, can't bring himself to dismember her. So he buries her.
Right.
And then she pops out a day later. Like she's just down there.
Just biding her time. That's when we get the airfield scene. So that's basically just the introduction of Annie and Ed. Annie is the daughter of the two people you were just referencing, who are Dr. Newbie and his wife Henrietta.
Yeah. It's Henrietta. I said
believe it's Henrietta.
Harriet.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So Annie is their daughter, and she's getting off of a plane, getting picked up by presumably her boyfriend Ed.
That's what I figured.
I think that they kiss at some point in the movie.
They're roommates.
And they were roommates. And she has more pages of the Book of the Dead.
Yeah.
That I guess maybe they already had those pages and then he found the full book.
Sure.
But she says that she hasn't spoken to her father in over a week. So that's about how long this has gone on.
Because we also get like a flashback in the very beginning of them in like an underground lair.
Yeah, it's like part of a castle, like a old demolished castle.
Yeah.
Where they find the book and the dagger.
Yeah. Very like Bugenhagen-ish.
Yeah.
Very like archaeological site, Indiana Jones, but they just find, and it's like on a table. Like it looks like a folding table with a bunch of dirt on it. It's the book.
It's just
and
kind
a
of
dagger.
sitting there. And that's pretty much all that scene does is just establish that they're here and they're heading to the cabin.
That these people found this stuff, which is funny because they've already said it, but then they're like, well, no, let's show them. Let's show them find this in person.
Yeah. Which then brings us to, I think I said it last week. My favorite part of this entire movie, maybe my favorite part in this entire franchise, is Ash alone in the cabin and eventually losing it. So the first portion of that is he's sitting in the chair in the middle of the living room. He has like boarded up everything. So I guess he feels safe because it's now nighttime again. And the piano starts playing by itself, which is the same song that he played in the recap at the beginning.
Right.
He finds, I've got the necklace here in my pocket. And then he cries, he breaks down thinking about Linda, which is when he goes to the window after hearing a sound.
What does he see?
Well, he sees a stop motion animated version of Linda's body coming out of the grave, reattaching her own head.
Right. Now the head, by the way, fine.
Yeah, pretty,
Human skin.
Yeah, but it looks like it has that doll face to it.
But,
it's not exactly the same.
No, but
it's not the same actress playing Linda.
What I'm saying is that the skin is fine,
is on it,
but then the body is like shrunken down,
like a rotted corpse.
Weird
From hours ago.
The funniest part, I laughed out loud because it's good stop motion.
Yeah.
And it dances about. It's like a weird ballerina doll. And it's kind of creepy and it's off-putting. And then it goes, literally, the vocals of the voiceover, it goes, "Ooh!" It just plies away into the dark.
Yeah, into the woods, but it kind of they cross-faded out, so it looks otherworldly. Like did she disappear? Or is she just disappearing into the darkness of the woods? I don't know what it is.
Again, this is an exercise in looking at the ping pong game that this movie is, of being amazing, then ridiculous, then amazing, then ridiculous. So this sequence, I have it written down.
Okay, good.
It's excellent, creepy 80s stop motion. It's really good stop motion. It's creepy. Followed by a plie with a strange vocal into the darkness. Again, I enjoy doing it, so I'll do it again. It's like, then it's him looking out the window, terrified, and it's boarded up. And the performance of that really captures terror.
Yeah.
And then floppy rubber puppet arms come through the window. And,
because she bursts in.
and it's just the floppy arms.
Outside the window, but yeah.
Right. And the floppy arms are hilarious. They are bad. They are poorly made. They are barely touching him. And he is having to act like they are grabbing him and strangling him, basically.
And they keep slamming his head up against the boards.
Then it cuts back to her, and the makeup is amazing.
Yes.
And up close, it's amazing. And so, again, we have ping-ponged back to amazing visual effects. And then we go to Ash in the chair, and then he ping-pongs himself.
Yeah.
Because he's both acting truly terrified, but also it's Bruce fucking Campbell. And so everything he does just makes me laugh.
Yeah.
And so he's going, because he screamed himself out and he can't scream anymore. And then the head gets thrown and it bursts through into the cabin and it lands in his lap. And the decapitated head being shot from his lap, like from his perspective, shot downwards, starts talking. And it's seamless.
Yeah.
Again, ping pong's back to amazing, groundbreaking shit. Stuff that I'm like, how did they do that? Because I can't see the seam. I can't see the gap. And then immediately he is bitten by it. And we ping pong back to a fucking cartoon
Because then he's just smashing it around the whole cabin.
we keep bringing this up on this channel, but he fucking Citizen Kane's the cabin because he's just slamming this head puppet that is ADR to be like.
He's having to act as if it's biting his hand, but he's just holding on to it.
So he's screaming like, "Ow, ow!" And he's smashing this head puppet
into the mantle, into like the bookcases, wherever he can.
And you have to imagine Sam Raimi is just off camera going like, like, yes, more. Bruce, give me more. That's his note every time. Every time Bruce takes a shot and they look at it, they're like, Bruce, give me a little more. Give me 20% more.
A little more.
Like 20%? I was at 180%. It's like, well, I need a crisp 200, Bruce.
That's what we're looking for here. This is Evil Dead 2.
I need you to make a face that no one's ever made. Do you understand, Bruce? I need you to look in this moment like no one has ever looked. And he's like, oh, I got it. I have the biggest chin. My chin to eyebrow ratio is 600 to 400. Trust me, I can look crazy.
This is also where, whenever we were watching it the other day, it like stopped you and you're like, what just happened? Did he say that? Because this is where he's like fighting and then he has the thought of work shed. And apparently he says it. He says work shed.
Yeah, it's like work shed. Like he's panicked.
Apparently what it is like while they were recording it, he says it, but you couldn't hear it clearly enough. So then they ADR'd it later. And then whenever they put it in like slightly in the wrong spot. So you don't really see his mouth say the words at the time that he says the words. And so it's like, is this just supposed to be like we're hearing his thoughts? Or did they just mess it up and we just have to live with it?
My note for that, because I did take a note for the work shed line, and it is work shed in all caps, but there's a space in between every letter. Work shed. It's the best. Because it's basically like he's like, work shed. And it's like, oh, God. It's terrifying. This is the scariest part of the Evil Dead 2.
But going into the work shed, and we never talked about the woodshed in the first in our first discussion, because there's a whole scene in there where he hacks up Linda. So we get kind of a not a redo of that, but he takes her head in there and puts it into a vice,
which is again amazing.
So it's a fake vice, and her shoulders are in that.
That's great. That's amazing. And it looks so good. And her performance is great. She mocks him. It's just, again, it's that thing that this franchise, these zombies, these monsters have that I love so much is the glee of like the emotional torture. It's like, we have her soul. She is damned eternally. Ha ha ha. And it's creepy. It's effective.
And it sets them apart from other demons, other monsters,
even like the demone monsters, which are again the most comparable because it's a demonic possession.
But those still are more mindless than
they are legion. They have a goal, and the goal is when unleashed, we want your soul, and before you give it to us, we are going to ruin.
Yeah, we're going to terrorize you.
Yeah, we're going to ruin your mind, and it's creepy. It's scary.
They're
good monsters.
This is also where we get our the return of the handshake, if you will, from Wes Craven to Sam Raimi, or Sam Raimi to Wes Craven in this case. We mentioned the Hills Have Eyes poster, the torn poster on the wall of the cellar in the first film. And then Wes repays that in Nightmare on Elm Street. Nancy, I believe, is watching The Evil Dead in that film. So in this one, he goes into the woodshed
and above the door,
no reason, whatsoever, Freddy's glove.
Yeah. And again, it rides that line. This is why I keep bringing this up, because this is what clicked for me is the puppet with the chainsaw, the headless puppet.
Ash pulls this curtain, and there's a like. In a woodshed or something, you'd have the outline of like the tool on the wall. There's an outline for the chainsaw that's missing.
Where's the chainsaw? And then, and this puppet, this skinny noodle armed puppet with the chainsaw is like marionette muppeted into the frame. And it's amazing. It's so great.
Because Ash like fights it off with he grabs a tire iron or something and he hits the chainsaw and it flips up and back into the stump.
Like the neck meat,
stump.
which then it looks like it truly cuts into it and it bleeds. It's such a good effect.
It's one of those things where like looking at it, because he's wrestling with this thing and he fights it down to the ground and it looks like an actual chainsaw.
It does.
And it's like,
you can see, it looks like you can see a blade moving.
And it's like, that is so close to him. And they're just like waving this puppet around at him. And it's like, how did no one get like a finger cut off in this sequence?
Well, here's the thing. In the 80s, people did coke. So really, jury's out on safety. Who cares? I'm going to do coke. I'm going to get in my bright blue sports car. I'm going to drive it around town. I'm going to play with a chainsaw. Those are the things they would do.
Man, it was a different time.
It was. I love that. I love the bits that we do that are like that, where
They just trail off.
well, I will say like, yes, expecting the audience to be like, okay, that's a thing they believe.
I agree.
Or I don't, but I respect their opinion. Like just then.
Yeah, right there. He fights that chainsaw away from the puppet. He then chainsaws Linda's possessed head, who is egging him on. Basically.
And like a lot of it is like in shadow or like projected.
They do that one, and the shadow of Bruce Campbell's face. He has a large chin.
Yes.
And he has a decent sized nose. Like he is known for like those two features of his face.
And his single eyebrow, but that's just a me thing.
Single eyebrow. But in the shadow, when he is chainsawing Linda's head and the blood is spraying on the wall, including the Freddy glove, which I think they stole off the set of one of the Freddy movies, which is why it's in that movie. Because like the K and B were working on that film as well. Anyway, his chin and his nose, it looks like even his normal one couldn't make that shadow.
Right.
It's like, did they put him in a prosthetic for this just to get a bigger shadow for those things? It looks ridiculous.
Or they lit him to get the shadow, but then like moved other flashlights like closer to his nose and chin. That's amazing. Because again, hearing the commentary, knowing how well these guys get along, you have to imagine that some of it's just like, fuck you, Bruce.
They just, they just pick on each other.
You got a big nose. We're going to make it bigger.
Honestly, for anyone interested, any of the audio commentaries for these movies that you can get your hands on, listen to them. They are hysterical.
Yeah.
Just listening to these guys who are just lifelong friends, still 20 years later, just picking fun at each other and making the dumbest jokes about this movie that they made. It's amazing. Ash goes back into the house, back into the cabin, and he gets this moment where he finds it's now a double barrel shotgun.
Yes.
Finds that and he trades off.
It's the funniest. It's the funniest thing because where this franchise leads, like even like the television show that this inspires and how important the chainsaw is, and just watching him go, and he kind of like lazily hucks it, and you hear it like on the ground, and he just like gun better and like walks away.
This is where we get our mirror Ash.
Really good effect.
Really good effect.
Yeah, and it's almost seamless. But the second time I watched it, I'm looking for the imperfections. I'm looking for them not moving exactly the same. And there's like one or two moments where it's just off.
So I can't speak to how like involved or how difficult this sort of effect is, but it's like there's a hole in the wall of the set. The real Bruce Campbell is behind it acting as the reflection, and then you have a body double acting as
who just looks enough like him from behind.
From that
right. And they probably rehearse their movements so that they're equal.
Yeah. And so it's like at first you think, oh yeah, it's just a mirror, and then he pops out and grabs himself, and they do that shot where it's Bruce talking to Bruce. It's Ash talking to Ash, and one of them has a little bit of prosthetics on.
Yeah.
That's where like he gets a little bit bigger chin, a little bit more defined.
He looks more cartoonish. Yeah, more like imagination.
Yeah. And it's kind of like they're teasing the idea of the evil Ash that then comes into play in Army of Darkness.
Right.
And
not only are they teasing that, but they're also teasing because like it like grabs him and is like trying to choke him. And then as he backs away, his own hands are around his neck. And then this leads to one of my favorite lines of the whole thing, because like his hand is now possessed.
Right. And they do that stop motion animation drawing on his hand.
Right. My assumption is that his hand is possessed because it was bitten by a deadite.
Yeah.
But
by Linda's head.
again, rules mean nothing.
Yeah.
But his hand is like begins to like try to murder him. And it's another odd ADR sequence because it's like his hand is like they've made it up. And again, makeup's so much better in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
The fingers are extended, the nails are long and black. It's really like the two hands look completely different. And he's a wonderful he's a clown. He's an excellent clown. And he's like in the kitchen, and the film is clearly sped up a bit, and he's like thrashing around.
It is it is a Three Stooges bit, just
with the plates. Yeah. But then it's so strange because it's like it's ADR'd with him being like, ow, and like clearly making mouth open noises, but his mouth is closed shut the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, it's one of those weird decisions because you could have just made him grunt, but then he says one of my favorite lines in this movie, give me back my hand. It reminds me of Stu Macher. Your mom's gonna be so mad. It's just like the most infantile, sad. Like and
it's one of those. He does it a couple times in this movie where he almost becomes Charlton Heston at the end of the Planet of the Apes, where he's like screaming. He does it at the bridge whenever he sees it's destroyed. He's just like, no! It's all overacted and just screaming at the heavens.
Give me back my hand is my favorite. And then it's like it's kicked his ass. He's laying down on the ground, bloody, and like this is where we develop like he's cut up and like his own hand has almost murdered him, and it's now dragging him across the floor towards a knife.
This amazing bit of just physical acting.
Yeah, because somebody's pushing him. Is my assumption.
I would think
either he's on like casters or something and he's pushed it, or they're literally just shoving him by his feet. But his hand drags him towards a butcher knife.
Like a big cleaver.
And then
the hand is also doing like little cartoony voices. It was like,
and then we enter the next layer of cartoonishness. He picks up the knife, he chops it into his hand, the blood spurts all over his face, and he is scream laughing, and it is pure insanity.
Yeah, he stabs his hand with like a kitchen knife.
It's like a long paring knife. Yeah.
Before it can get to the cleaver, and then
he like kind of agonizes in pain.
And then he takes that chainsaw, drags it over, and just hacks his own hand off. And it's just, I mean, a gallon of blood just spraying him in the face.
Again, that's a real. There's a real chainsaw involved.
Yeah,
because you can see the blade spinning. And it is scary as fuck to think about that.
The hand I know was gelatin.
Sure.
And that's why it gets like that wiggle whenever he stabs it. And
it's a good prop.
It's a simple prop. Apparently they had to like keep it on ice until they were like about to, do the scene because it was hot whenever they were shooting it this time. He then he takes his hand, he puts it under a bucket in the middle of the floor in the living room. And they do this gag that I absolutely love, where he takes a stack of books and puts it on top of the bucket to hold it down with the hand inside. And the book on top of that stack is called A Farewell to Arms.
Yes.
He then duct tapes the stump of his hand.
And then his hand.
And you see the bucket scurry away in the background.
This is so good because it's important to point out the fact that this next sequence where the hand is like running through the mouse holes and shit, that's just Tom and Jerry.
Yep.
That Ash has become Tom and his hand is now Jerry, and it is running through these mouse holes to the point where it gets caught in a mouse trap.
And then it's the laugh that he gives of just like
like, you fucking son of a bitch, because he keeps almost shooting it. And then
it like flips him off at one point,
which is great because, and that you can kind of see the seam. You can see that there is a human hand poking out of the ground that they have then built a bloody wrist on. It's effective.
A lot of it's good. Sometimes it's an actual hand like that. Sometimes it's a stop motion hand. It's a bit like, it looks like, I'm sure it's some of the same tricks that they used for Thing in the Addams Family.
But again, the original Addams Family, he comes out of boxes.
Yeah.
But then, like, Addams
the
Family
90s,
Values, those movies, a lot of those tricks, how much of that is like, oh, well, they did this cool thing in The Evil Dead. And it's like, yeah, let's just do that.
I hadn't thought of it in that. Yeah.
I keep thinking about
That's a
how
good
important
point.
this movie might be, because I might be wrong. There might be more examples of disembodied hands that they would have pulled from to make those movies. But it's like, this seems like an obvious comparison. You literally have an evil fucking severed hand giggling and running around.
Ash fires into the wall a couple times, eventually hits it. And then a little trickle of blood
Comes out of the fucking wall. And this is where I really feel bad for him. Because it geysers out and then it's black. It's like ink. It's like squid ink blood.
It's awful. And so again, kind of like with the first one, whenever they did the mirror becoming water, they had to build the set, a copy of it on its side, strap him onto a board so that he could be, vertical, quote unquote.
And just drop a bucket of water.
Yeah. And I mean gallons of blood,
And
which then turns
into ink, like
Yeah.
black, like rotten blood.
Yeah.
The funniest part of it, though, to me, the funniest part, because this is so much an exercise, and oh my God, we're all Sam Raimi. This is so much an exercise of laughing at Ash's struggle, which Sam Raimi's just laughing his ass off about fucking with Bruce Campbell. All of this happens. He shoots the wall. It starts to bleed. It blasts rotten shit onto his face. And then it just undoes it.
Yeah.
It's just like, and he's sitting there and he's looking and he's like, what the fuck just happened? He looks so like
defeated,
vulnerable.
confused.
He's like, why? And then he loses his goddamn mind.
Because that's when it's like you hear the creak first. And he looks up at the mounted head of a deer above the mantle.
I need to point this out. Last week, we mentioned that deer, and you said that this week's discussion, that would be a very important part because it's the best part of the movie. This is the best act 2 of all time. Derek, walk me through the beginning.
So he hears that sound and he looks up and the deer retches its head to look down at him. The deer now has the white out dead-eyed eyes.
And is like sunken cheeked and kind of rotten. Yeah.
And it already is like making noises at him and kind of laughing, kind of cackling in his direction. And then a lamp on the other side of the wall behind Ash, it's like a gooseneck lamp. It starts kind of laughing like Popeye. And
it's like moving, like it's leaning all the way back and all the way forward and all the way back. And the chair is laughing and it's like rocking, but like in a stagger. And the clock hands are going crazy and the whole cabin begins to laugh.
The books start laughing. The cabinets start laughing. The cushions on the couch start popping up. And the bucket that the hand was in is spinning in a circle.
I wrote my note for this, by the way, is Haunted Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah.
And it's,
yeah, absolutely.
This leads to my favorite part of this movie and what I think we need to post for this episode, because we like to promote our episodes. I think what we post on social media every day for Evil Dead 2 is a GIF of Ash is laughing his fucking ass off because he's lost his goddamn mind. And he turns and he sees the lamp bobbing and he's like, and he starts to like oompa loompa dance with the lamp. And he stops and he looks at it and the lamp stops. And they both just start laughing.
Yeah, they
again.
both burst into like the heartiest chuckle.
It is the most insane, I've lost my fucking mind laughter. And it turns into panic and screaming.
Yeah, he gets to a point where he stops laughing. He is laughing maniacally for so long, and then he stops, hears a noise, turns, and shoots through the front door with the shotgun because there was a knock at the door.
Yeah.
And that's when we finally enter in the rest of our cast basically for this movie.
Yeah, to catch up with the rest of the cast, the daughter of the man who recorded the tapes from the cabin and her presumed boyfriend, Ed, have now arrived to the cabin
Yeah.
with help of what looks like a tow truck driver
Yeah, he was setting up like roadblocks for the bridge.
and his partner.
Okay, this is a question because, so his name is Jake. And her name is Bobby Joe because he says it about 1,000 times.
Yeah, that's all his dialogue is running around going, Baba Joe. And it's crazy that they wrote him saying that so many times.
They meet out there on the road, and it is unclear whether they are a couple or if this is a brother and sister.
Are they?
Or both.
Are they? Oh, well. Evil Dead Alabama edition. It is unclear also whether or not they are like being honest or if they're just like kind of like crappy and like shilling for like, oh, well, we'll take you, but it's going to cost money. Like,
it's a
is
strange,
it a highwayman kind of situation?
It's a really strange thing because it's like it's a road that like basically just leads out to one single cabin in these woods. The bridge is out, okay. Are they really going to send somebody to put a couple flashing signs out that says that the bridge is out?
Also, if the bridge is out, they're like, well, there's a trail to get there. And it's like, oh, okay. The people because she's like, I tell you what, I'll give you 100 if you take my bags. And he looks and there's like a bag.
Yeah, he sees like the pages of the book and her little handbag.
He's like, done deal or whatever. And he takes it. And it's like, so if there is a trail and y'all know it, why do they have to leave their car? It's just, I think we can't just have two people.
Yeah.
We can't have the whole movie be one guy for the first 2/3 of it. And then, because I don't count Linda as a person almost at all in this movie. She becomes a Deadite so quickly.
Yeah.
And then,
that is her purpose.
Yeah. And then the gunshot through the door is revealed to have hit
Bobby Joe in the shoulder.
Bobby Joe, obviously sister wife. That's what we're calling her now. Bobby Joe's sister wife.
That's good.
So she's hit BJSW, Bobby Joe's sister wife, is hit in the shoulder by the shotgun blast. And they tackle Ash.
Jake tackles and then Ed comes in and they rough him up and
knock him out, presumably. Which again, Ash Williams cannot catch a fucking break.
Not at all.
The wall literally threw up ichor into his mouth, sucked it back off of him till he was dry, then made him laugh with a lamp, and then humans ran in and beat his ass unconscious because he was hunting his own hand that he had to cut off after it smashed plates on him.
Yeah, you keep saying, you keep talking about how this is the greatest movie of all time. I get it.
It is. It is. Truly, I came into this review of like, man, this is going to like test the boundaries of the survivability of this podcast. Cause like you love this movie and I don't think I do. And now it's like I'm sure there's going to be so much of this discussion that we have to cut out just for time. Cause like I could talk about this movie for a day.
That's the real of it all.
Yeah.
Annie also comes in at that point. She spots the bloody chainsaw on the ground, basically piecing together of like, well, this is my parents' cabin. Where are they? Who is this man in here? Because that's another detail in the retelling, the recap at the beginning of this.
She goes, Linda in the car as they're driving is like, are you sure it's abandoned? And he's like, yeah, I think so. Maybe.
So,
like, what?
So they're like, in this version, they're just breaking into this cabin.
Well, yeah.
Whereas they rented it in the Evil Dead.
Well, and that's the question. Is it like a rent by owner Airbnb situation where like this person just
that.
Well, no, I mean that existed. Is it somebody with property that's like, no, you can rent this out for a couple weeks, and they're just hoping that somebody else hasn't done that at the same time? Because it's not like you'd have an app.
Oh yeah, I mean maybe.
But at the same time, it makes total sense to me that Annie would look at a bloody chainsaw, a man who is he's a fucking psycho.
Yeah.
And He's just shot through the door, so he's armed, and there's a bloody fucking weapon on the ground. My parents are gone, and there is a lock on the cellar. So, like, yeah, that makes sense to imagine that Ash murdered your family.
Mm-hmm. And so they jump to that conclusion. They throw him in the cellar, and they lock him down there.
Right.
And Annie begins playing more of the tape.
Where her father does the thing that all Evil Dead movies, retelling or Rise requires, which is it speaks words in whatever language they have either invented or have used for the purpose of storytelling. It speaks these words. And then again, Mr. Can't Catch a Fucking Break has now been locked in the fruit cellar, where in the earthen ground,
Henrietta.
The professor's wife, Henrietta, is dead and buried, who then pops up out of the ground.
And it's stop motion for the head coming out of the ground. And then it's Ted Raimi in a suit.
And that, I did not know that was Ted Raimi. Are you fucking serious?
Yeah, that is Ted.
Oh, I love that so much. That is the funniest fucking thing ever.
The other thing I'll say, because they stress this in the commentary, is whenever that head pops up, Ash screams like a woman.
He does.
And it's because Sam was like, yeah, you know, Bruce, you scream like a man a whole lot already. Do this one like a woman. Just scream like a woman. And so, I don't know, it was just
Like
his direction. Yeah.
And then what I love about the stop motion and head coming up is all the worms in the forehead. It's a good effect, and it's also ridiculous because per the narrative of the story, she hasn't been dead that long.
Yeah, maybe like a week.
Yeah, but it's like you're not going to have like that level of decomposition in that quick. I mean, unless like the fruit cellar is. If you live somewhere with a fruit cellar in your cabin, let us know if it's notorious and lousy with worms that go into heads of the deceased. And then turn yourself in.
Yeah.
You're a criminal.
For doing South crime, as we referenced in the
That's
last
right.
one.
You're moonshining and you've got people buried in the earthen floor of your fruit cellar. You creep. Turn yourself in. You don't deserve to be out on these mean streets.
So Ash is obviously trying to get away. He's begging for them to let him out of the cellar,
Again, which so amazing. Can't catch a break. He's screaming.
which they think that he's lying
Right.
just to get out.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Henrietta is slowly inching her way across the cellar to him.
And it's fantastic. Like the legs are all like bloated and parts of them are missing. And it's just excellent. And now that I know it's Ted Raimi, I am so that made my whole day.
Remind me, whenever they make it out toward the end of the movie, some disgusting facts going on with that.
Okay, pin.
You get this stop motion transformation of Henrietta's head into like this elongated, like puppet form. They call it in the commentary the Pee-wee head. And I don't know why. I don't know if that's like an in joke with them or if they're referencing like Pee-wee's Playhouse sort of thing. Cause it does kind of fit that sort of, build. And so they pull Ash out of the cellar finally. Henrietta's puppeted head then pops out. And that's when like Ed gets smashed into the wall. He smashes into like a painting on the wall, falls on the floor. And Ash closes the lid of the cellar door onto Henrietta's puppet head. And he jumps. And that's when the eyeball pops out and flies across the room into Bobby Joe's mouth.
Which, for the record, that's how you do an eyeball flying. Friday the 13th. It doesn't just stick out on a stick to do 3D visuals, you hacks. You make it fly across the room and into a sister wife's mouth.
Right. As far as I'm aware, that is like a ping pong ball on a string.
Right.
In certain cuts of the movie, like if you see it on like VHS or DVD where they before they really cleaned it up, you can still see the string. And then whenever it goes into her mouth, it's like a gelatin eye. And then they add in a gulp sound as she moves out of frame, which is hilarious. Certain cuts of the movie, like if you see it on like VHS or DVD where they before they really cleaned it up, you can still see the string. And then whenever it goes into her mouth, it's like a gelatin eye. And then they add in a gulp sound as she moves out of frame, which is hilarious. Henrietta is then slammed back down into the cellar. She becomes her human form again. We see this sweet older woman.
You were born on September 3rd, and it was snowing, and I will never forget that because it's so strange that it snowed. And it's like, you saying these things, ma'am, is creepier than you were before.
Yeah.
Stop talking about her birth. You be like, hey, no, I'm good now.
She also sings Mockingbird to Annie, which presumably that's something that she sang growing up, but that comes back later whenever Annie tries to trick her. And that's when we get the clip that we played, which is Ed popping up, possessed now.
With a million teeth. And he says dead by dawn. And it's a really good, it's really good. We talked about the rating and the needing to keep the gore down, which is why I believe that when he bites her hair and yanks it out, it's just hair.
Well, that actually, because it's, Ed, that actor or whatever, in makeup for a lot of it. He's floating around and stuff. The hair bite is actually a puppet.
Yeah.
So they could actually puppet it over, bite the hair. But it was a whole thing where they could pull that appliance and have the robot, head of it swallow the hair. What I thought you were going to say is that to try and keep the rating down, this is a good example of that, because whenever Ash hacks up Ed at this moment, instead of red blood spraying out of him, it's like this green slime.
Yeah. Which is funny because they do that a little bit in the first movie, but it's more like, I think you said it's like the androids from Alien.
Yeah. Because they spew like milk out of their mouth with the blood as well.
Yeah.
This was their attempt, because the rating system, the MPAA, it's such a stupid
Well, what's funny is that we still see examples of that. So, in Mortal Kombat, if you're really into Mortal Kombat and you want to watch videos of people playing, and they'll play on Twitch or whatever, and then they'll clip what they're really good fights and they'll put them on YouTube, and you sit and you want to watch, because watching people play the game is a really good way to practice. It's, that's a cool combo, I'm going to try to learn that. And they either play against Reptile, because Reptile is animated in the game with green blood, or at the end of their match, they color invert.
Oh, okay.
Because YouTube, the AI sensor will detect the blood and flag it.
That's interesting.
So we still have examples of that censorship going on now.
And that's the simple way of well, it's not blood. It's not like human blood, so you can kind of get away with it sometimes.
Yeah.
But still, there was way too much stuff going on. They were going to get the X rating anyway.
The hair bite is great. All of that is great. The clips where it's like a static frame and the wiggling arm comes flying through as Ash is just hacking him to pieces.
It just spins through the air. I love that.
It's great.
And because that's a motif that then continues in further movies as well.
Just as a note, again, fucking Looney Tunes.
That's when Jake then looks out the window, and they're all kind of coming down from the craziness of that. Jake looks out and he realizes, the trail that we came in here on, it's gone. The woods has just swallowed it up.
Right.
And
he's a good performer.
Yeah,
he plays kind of earnestly scared, but like a dumb hick, and it's really good.
But he's good, and he's missing those teeth, and apparently that was real. He I think tried out for the part, and they were like, "Yeah, you're pretty good. We're not sure." And then he popped those teeth out, and they were like, "No, well, this is our guy."
Yeah,
so
that's great.
The whole group is kind of gathered there in the corner of the cabin at that point, and the clock stops, and everything goes completely silent for just a few moments before crazy sound effects start popping up all around the cabin. It seems to be coming, the way that they're reacting is it sounds like stuff is happening on the outside of the cabin that they cannot see.
The reaction shots there are so brilliant of they look down and left, and then they look up and right, and they look up and left, and then down and right, and it's like there's
and it just keeps like snap zooming onto different things in the room. It is a very simple
but it's effective because it feels frantic.
Yeah.
It feels like something bad is happening.
And you can't see it, and you don't know what is real, what's imagined, what is going to come bursting through the wall here in a second, or anything. And then I believe Bruce says, or Ash says, I keep calling him Bruce. Ash says the line, "Maybe something is trying to force its way into our world."
Right.
Which is like, well, why would you say that? But all right. And then the bedroom door like creaks open, and so they decide to go in there. And you get this like ghostly demonic face that phases in that bedroom, and it's supposedly the face of Annie's father. Mm-hmm. And he gives them basically a warning of like, hey, we messed up. This is what we did. The only way that you're going to be able to save yourselves and end this whole thing is you got to read from those pages that you brought, Annie. There's two lines on there you got to read. The first one is going to do this. The second one's going to do this. But salvation lies in those pages. Good luck.
Yeah.
And it's like the demonic face looks kind of like, I mean, it's a cartoony-ish version of like the subliminal faces that pop up in The Exorcist.
Yeah. It also looks like I don't even know what it is. I just know that there's billboards and posters, and like a lot of people will graffiti. It's like a very like stern cartoonish face, and it says "obey" under it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what that reminded me of a little bit.
Yeah. And then in that scene, then Bobby Joe and Jake, Bobby Joe's like, "Jake, you're holding my hand too tight." He's like, "Bobby Joe, I'm not holding your hand." And the camera, pans down to Ash's dead hand is now holding Bobby Joe's hand. So she freaks out, and she runs out into the forest.
Mm-hmm. Now, last week when a female lead ran out into the forest, we had to give a trigger warning. Fortunately, this time I think they learned that that's a really weird thing to do in your movie, and we don't have to give a trigger warning this time.
Now, what they do in this is they still wrap her up in vines, and it's incredible reverse. They reverse the film to make it look like it's wrapping around her, but that means that the whole scene she's having to act in reverse. She's having to undo whatever she's doing. It's anytime that those sorts of things happen in these movies, I'm super impressed by that, because it's the level of acting of like, well, how do I walk backwards and move in a way that makes that
sense. Doesn't look like I'm being filmed and having the footage reversed,
right? And then it just wraps around her and pulls her kind of comedically through the trees.
She smashes into the puddle that we see evil Ash in, I presume.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's such a hard splash because she's clearly slammed into it. My assumption is that she's being driven, like she's on a rope and being driven.
Yeah. I would think so.
Or a stunt performer.
It's got to be a stunt performer, because my God. And then they're just overclocking it, just cranking that film to make it faster. And then as she's getting pulled, she slams into a tree, like the trunk of a tree, and it smash cuts to Ash tossing the case that held the pages of the book onto the ground, shattering glass. And then he says the thing of it feels like somebody just walked over my grave.
Yeah.
Like he gets that chill. And whenever they look at the pages of the book, there's an illustration on one of the pages that shows a figure wearing a blue shirt and white pants.
The man who fell from the sky.
Yes. And he is holding up a chainsaw and a shotgun, and he's standing in front of a castle with a crowd of people.
They're like, this picture is 3,000 years old. It's the man prophesied to save the world. Man in blue shirt with chainsaw, missing arm and shotgun.
I wonder where that's going to go.
I wonder who that could be.
That's when Annie then, reads through the passages, or she figures out that, like, you got to read the first passage. It makes the dark spirit manifest in the flesh.
Right. Which, again, okay.
And Ash is like, Well, why would you want to do that?
Right.
And then the second passage creates a rift in time and space to force the spirit back through.
Great.
So you got to do both.
You can't exorcise them. You can't trap them in a Ghostbusters trap. You have to send them back in time.
Mm-hmm. It's the only way.
Good.
That's where they came from.
Oh, good.
Jake not wanting to hear that and not dealing well with the loss of Bobby Joe running out in the woods. He wants to go find her. So he takes the shotgun whenever they're not looking. He throws the pages that they had that have the thing that are going to solve the problem. He tosses those into the cellar and he forces Ash and Annie outside.
During all this process, he has one of my favorite lines where they're talking about needing to go back down into the cellar to do something. And they're like, come on, we got to do that. And he's like, hell no, you're the curious ones.
Yeah.
This is such a good line.
This section is a lot like Within the Woods, the proof of concept film that Sam Raimi made. Because in that, Ash is actually the one that becomes possessed. And then he like kills the rest of his friends.
Okay.
And so that's what happens here is like the evil force, flies up, is knocking down trees again. And you think it's going to attack Jake because he's screaming for Bobby Joe. And then instead, Ash, now again dead-eyed,
yeah.
possessed, he pops up, lifts Jake up into the air and throws him head first into a tree.
Yeah.
And then Annie runs back inside and we get a couple, repetitions of the join us, which is a favorite of the Deadites to say. Mm-hmm. And this is one of my least favorite parts of the movie. It's a brief little sequence.
It's just long.
Yeah. Ash tries to break down the front door and then he remembers, there's a back door. So he goes, he's heading around the side of the cabin. Annie grabs the Kandarian dagger, which is in there, and it doesn't look exactly like it did in the first movie.
No, it's just like a knife with skeleton on it. Yeah.
It's a little,
little Party City-ish, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah, because it's like the blade, it almost looks like it's made out of like a spine.
Right.
And she goes to the back door and Jake breaks in.
Right.
She, thinking it's Ash, stabs him in the stomach. Mm-hmm. And then it's this comedic, he falls on the ground. Actual Ash, evil Ash pops up outside the window. He's coming around. And so she's trying to close the door. She keeps slamming it on Jake, pulls him out finally, slams the door. Ash is trying to break in. Her screams don't sound real.
Right.
Like, I've never seen that actress in anything else.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't seen most of these actors in
It's Ted Raimi
else.
in a wig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might have been better. Because, the way, I don't know, it's something about the way she screams. It's does not feel real, does not feel like she's actually terrified in any way.
Yeah, no.
And then, like, Annie and Jake are just yelling at each other a whole bunch as she drags him into the front room.
Shut up! Shut up! And he's like, I'm in so much pain.
And then he's like, you got to get this thing out of me. And she pulls the dagger out of his stomach. And I don't know. I don't particularly like this little section. But then she gets him into the front. And as she's she steps away to do something. And that's when Henrietta pops back out of the cellar and grabs him by the head and pulls him into the cellar. And Annie grabs his legs and is like trying to pull him back out, fight Henrietta for Jake, a tug of war. And then just a geyser of blood shoots out of the cellar door.
They're like, man, I hope we get a double X rating. Fuck this movie. Let's do the same bit twice.
Yeah, it truly is. It's just that. And then what's the funniest bit is apparently they had shot some other thing that got cut, and then they ended up doing that instead, but they used the footage from the first for after the blood explosion, because if you look at her clothing, she has almost no blood on her at all after being just covered, just drenched. Yeah. Ash pops back up. Again, it's one of these motifs where Ash is just back in the house. There's no explanation because she's locked both doors and he pops, into frame.
Yeah. He went through the fruit cellar. He dug a hole.
And he throws her against a wall. She gets knocked out. And then he sees the necklace on the floor.
In the skull shape again.
Yes, it's doing the shape of the skull.
Which is silly.
For no explanation.
Yeah.
And the love theme plays. And he thinks about Linda. And it makes him cry. And he snaps out of being a Deadite.
Which, again, she's trying to kill him with the axe.
And then
she's still trying to murder him.
Just immediately tries to kill him with the axe.
And he, grabs her by the face. And he's like, I'm all right, damn it. And it's like, you're doing a terrible job of convincing me of that. First of all, you've touched me. You've become physical. You're screaming. So you kind of still seem possessed.
Yeah. It could go either way.
Yeah, just a bit.
It's funny how long it takes for her to stop attacking him with the axe.
Yeah. Which makes sense. I would want to chop him up too.
Oh, yeah.
Because she doesn't know him. He called her kid.
She thought that he hacked up her parents with a chainsaw.
Right.
Speaking of chainsaw, they decide that they have to go into the cellar to get those pages back.
Yes.
But before then, they make the greatest thing.
They do the hero sequence.
Yes.
Where Ash turns into a man with a chainsaw hand with the rever kind of built into a pulley system that also is leather straps that lead to a holster for his then sawed off, because he saws off the shotgun with his chainsaw arm and puts it on his back. So he looks like the Terminator, but in cabin clothes, like brown work pants and a blue button down. And then he has a chainsaw arm.
Yeah, it's great. That whole sequence, one of my favorite montages ever. It's all these snap zooms onto, just quick, cut of them picking up a tool or tightening something or moving something. It very much, and I mean, this is kind of where it's probably invented, but it's very much like something Edgar Wright would do in a movie now.
Yeah.
Now, this is a fact that I know you will love.
Okay.
Because when it comes to that chainsaw hand, the effects artist's name was Vern Hyde, and he modified a real chainsaw. He replaced the gas lead engine with a 12-volt electric motor, but left enough room, space in it, for Bruce Campbell to actually put his hand in there. The teeth of the saw were then filed down for safety purposes. And this is the part you'll love. Tobacco smoke was pumped through a plastic tube that ran up Campbell's leg to simulate the chainsaw smoke. And that tobacco smoke was made by Sam Raimi smoking off camera.
Oh my God. He's on the Mount Rushmore of directors who made horror movies in weird periods of time and just smoked his fucking lungs out. This is amazing.
And this is where he says the line, groovy.
I love the zoom into him and just groovy. It is so weird.
He goes down into the cellar. Freddy's glove is now, for no reason, down in the cellar, hanging next to the door down there. The next section of the cellar, once he goes through that door, is flooded.
Yeah.
And there's a boiler that's making noise, but he keeps the whole time he keeps finding the pages as he goes. How somehow they got scattered all around the whole boiler room, or the whole cellar rather.
In my notes, I have that the cellar, when you're in it, seems way bigger than it would need to be.
Yeah.
You would think the size of maybe a closet or a pantry.
But there's 2 to 3 rooms.
Right.
There's
It's got
all these
columns.
pipes.
Yeah.
There's gourds hanging from a section of it. And then a spooky skeleton pops out, which presumably is the remains of Jake,
Yes.
who had been devoured by Henrietta. Finds all the pages, he gives them back up to Annie, and then Henrietta pops out finally from under the stairs and pulls him again. Ted Raimi in a suit. And then she knocks Ash out or something, and then pops up out of the cellar, and she's floating around in the air, and she's grabbing at Annie's hair. Now, this is where I'll get to my pin from earlier of all the grossness.
Yeah.
So Ted Raimi is in this suit. It's this giant, awful fat suit of he looks like a bloated corpse.
Yeah.
And this was late in the shoot at this point, the scene. And he's hung up above the set spinning around because it's like Henrietta can float and fly at this point. And he's just spinning around. But it's like parts of it were falling apart. Parts of it were the like what that suit was made out of was like breaking down. So like the crotch is all blown out on it. You can kind of see it on a couple of the shots as she spins around. Like the back of it is kind of busted out. The disgusting part is how hot it got in that suit.
Oh, no.
And the amount of sweat that he was creating. At the end of days of shooting in that suit, he would, like, take it off. He'd take off his little, like, booties, you know, that were, like, shaped like the feet of Henrietta.
Booty means butt.
Yeah, that doesn't, not in this case.
Oh, okay. Typically, though.
Yeah. And he would pour the sweat out of it.
Which is, on its own, just foul.
It gets worse.
Oh, God.
Because in the movie itself, you can see this now. I mean, I watched it on the Blu-ray version.
Okay.
And so can you, people at home. You can watch this right now.
It's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, keep an eye out. Henrietta is floating in the air, kind of like snatching at Annie's hair. Ash finally climbs out of the cellar, and they're yelling back and forth at each other. And Henrietta turns her head to yell at Ash. And you see it at the bottom of the frame. Sweat just pours out of the ear hole.
That is so disgusting.
Of the mask onto Annie.
I didn't notice that. I'll have to rewatch that.
Yeah. Until they really pointed it out on the commentary. And then it's like, oh my God, that is awful.
That's something I'd be interested in hearing is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how gross do you think that is? If you look in the description of our episode, there's a link to text us. Mm-hmm. That would be a really good way to start. Shoot us a text. Give us a 1 to 10 scale on how disgusting you think it is that Ted Raimi's ear sweat poured onto the body of a young girl in a cellar under a prop-built cabin.
Oh, just awful.
That's the most disgusting. You are right. I did love that. Well, yeah, that's why I'm confused, because you pitched that as, oh, PJ, you are going to love this. And it's like,
yeah.
Ew.
Yeah. The Henrietta's head morphs again into that elongated, like, Pee-wee puppet form, as they called it.
But this time it's so much worse.
Yeah. And
it's like E.T.
And it's making, like monkey, like chimp noises.
Yeah, so I have that. Okay, my note reads exactly. I'm so happy about that. My note reads, the mom turns into E.T. but makes chimp noises. I don't understand what's happening. That's what my note reads.
I don't think anybody does. That sequence of Henrietta now fighting with Ash is like, it goes back and forth between it being a puppet, it being, you know, Ted in the costume, it being stop motion animation. It looks a bit like Jason and the Argonauts, like Ray Harryhausen, that sort of style, kind of rear projection or something. Because you get a couple more of those, like what you pointed out before, of like the hands getting cut off, the head getting cut off, and then spinning through the air.
Yeah, it's like their own little like. Yeah. And it like flies away.
And that was when Annie sings Mockingbird back at Henrietta to distract her. And that's Ash cuts her hands off, her head's off, her head. She only has the one.
Well, that we know of. She had all that neck hidden in there.
That's
Who
true.
knows how many fucking heads she has. It's truly terrifying.
And then the head continues to go like, I'll swallow your soul. I'll swallow your soul. And Ash puts his foot on its neck and is like, swallow this. And then shoots it with the shotgun. And that was like, that head was a gelatin head. There's a fake foot on it for that because they really just shot it with a shotgun.
Amazing. I think for the longest time I've posited that like either Brad Bird or John Carpenter are my favorite directors. I really think that Sam might be up there.
Sam's up there.
The like, oh yeah, we'll just use like a gel head and we'll put a boot on it and we'll shoot it with a fucking gun because nothing's gonna look more real than just shooting it with a fucking gun. And it's like, yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah,
we'll use a gelatin hand because nothing's gonna look more realistic than if Bruce just stabs it with a fucking knife.
Yeah, I mean, it allows them to do so much because you can just stab right into it.
And he's like, yeah, we'll just put a bunch of sweat in people's motherfucking ears. That is going to stick with me forever.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Like, we're recording this one pretty late, and I'm going to take the time to, after this, pull that scene up because I want to watch it.
Yeah, it's great. During that fight, I believe Annie has now read the first passage from the book.
At which point, we are visited by our first indication that the Evil Dead series is part of the MCU officially, because Groot shows up. Groot's there, big, angry. He's got people's heads that stick out of him, like the weird pizza in Nightmare on Elm Street with all the screaming pepperoni souls.
Yeah, see, the way I thought of that more, I also went with a Nightmare reference, but mine was for... it's when
all the faces are on his chest.
4, whenever all the faces of his like victims are coming out of the
4.
chest.
And I think my reference is in 5 when he's like he picks up like the pepperoni or whatever, which is disgusting.
It's disgusting.
Well, this is also disgusting because he then takes the chainsaw, and like shoves it into the eye of the tree.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's like, so the trees have like gotten up and they've walked over, and they are now just punching the outside of the cabin for a while.
Yeah,
they're the physical trees.
Yeah,
and it's all like puppets on a miniature set and everything. It's great.
And then he chainsaws one of the giant tree's eyeballs.
Yeah. It's this face that bursts through the front door, and they call that one the rotten apple head.
Fantastic,
because that's, I guess, what it kind of resembles.
And like Slimer was onion head.
Yeah. So,
by the way, if you don't know that, Slimer from the Ghostbusters, that character's name is Onion Head.
Yeah,
not Slimer.
Correct. The puppet is just phenomenal for that. Hands, like tree hands, reach in through the windows and grab Ash and pull him ahead. That's when he chainsaws it in the face or in the eye.
Once again, a different color of blood, but this time it's not green. It's like a gray blue. It's bizarre.
Yeah. And whenever it first pops in, there's this really cool effect where it's a stop motion, like they paint on his hair, but Ash sees that head come through the front door, and there's a streak of his hair that turns white. And
like it's aging him. And he even says, like, don't look at it.
Yeah.
Keep reading your fucking pages.
And so she keeps doing that. He's fighting with it. And then she gets stabbed in the back by Ash's evil hand with the Kandarian dagger.
Which, by the way, that dagger, floppy as fuck.
Yes.
It is like... I'm going to use a word here. We try not to use language like this typically, so buckle up, folks, because here's the Band-Aid tear. It looks very much like a dildo.
Yeah.
It flops around.
It's
around. Bizarre.
For something that you're stabbing into people, yeah, it's bizarre. And
well, for something that we've established that you already have a solid prop for.
Yeah.
It just...
At times, like sometimes it is a solid prop, but a lot of times it's just wiggling around.
Because they spend a lot of time on it because you've stabbed your heroine in the back, and it's like, oh, that's floppy as fuck.
Yeah, it's strange. She finishes the second passage. A portal opens. They turn the wind machines on because everything's getting sucked into that portal.
Yeah,
and
she, I assume, dies.
Yeah,
like she finishes reading, she kind of mumbles the last word, and that's what opens the portal.
Yeah,
but
and then her eyes close and she
dies.
Yeah. I mean, she's been stabbed in the back, so the head retreats. What's funny about that head, the rotten apple head, is that puppet was like so heavy that they couldn't transport it back to California or wherever after the shoot. So they just left it on set
Still
in the
just
middle
somewhere out in the middle of the
and
woods.
so it disappeared for a bit. And that they found it a couple years later being used in a local Halloween like haunted house attraction. So there was a period of time in like the late 80s, early 90s where there was a haunted house, just a local haunt in North Carolina where they were using an actual prop from Evil Dead 2.
Could you imagine, we live in Florida. Could you imagine, for those of you who listen to our podcast that don't live in Florida, yeah, it's about as bad as you've heard. But could you imagine
Send help.
A local haunt is Sir Henry's Haunted Trail. Could you imagine going through Sir Henry's and it's like, hold on, is that the statue from Hellraiser 3?
Yeah.
Like, what is that doing here? That would be amazing. It would
Yeah.
truly be amazing. Lot of 80s special effects here of things swirling around, and even like him, like he grabs the plank and it's like he's holding on to it as it's in the door frame, and it's clear like they're shooting from an angle as he's like.
It's a lot of bad blue screen.
Yeah. It's bad blue screen, but what's funny is by this point, okay, I'm going to reference another film. We've done that a lot in this because you can compare this movie. This really is Evil Dead, so you can compare it to a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street has some of the most amazing visual effects of all time.
Yeah.
And then at the very end of the theatrical release of that movie, your main character's mother becomes a blow-up doll and is sucked through the window of a front door. And it is awful. So here's the thing. All of the amazing special effects in the world do not buy you an excuse for a terrible visual effect at the end, as proven by one of the most famous horror movies of all time. What I will say is that Evil Dead 2, amazing visual effects, the entire movie, some groundbreaking shit, really crazy camera work, good vision, good directing, everything's perfect. And then right at the very end, kind of choppy, kind of shitty.
Couple shots.
But it's not blow up doll bad.
No.
That's the scale, is blow up doll bad.
Especially because it redeems itself. Because Ash and his car get sucked into this portal.
Chainsaw, shotgun.
Everything that he needs is sucked into that portal.
Yeah.
And
bullets.
And he tumbles back into time.
Yeah.
Where he crash lands in the middle of like, it's a gravel pit is where they shot it.
It looks like somewhere in the Crusades. It's like, because there are kind of like matte painting castles in the background, but it's like a desert.
Yeah.
And then knights, like
on horseback,
medieval knights,
surround him and like draw their swords, because it's like.
And this is important because this is the first time in the franchise where we hear the word Deadite, because somebody says like, kill the beast. He's a Deadite.
Yeah, the wizard steps forth and says that. And then before they like pull the swords back, like they're all going to stab him at the same time. And then a winged demon flies in.
Which is bad stop motion. For the first time in this franchise, I would say that this is kind of bad stop motion.
I just love stop motion. So
I
it's
do
like,
too, but it goes from being like, most of the movie is like Tim Burton-esque stop motion. It's polished. It's good. It looks like very dated, but I like that date. I like 80s stop motion. And then right here at the very end is like, I'm going to have a weird pull here. It's like Ben's stop motion movie that he's trying to make in Parks and Rec called Requiem for a Sunday.
Okay.
And it's like choppy, shitty stop motion. That's what, out of nowhere, this is like shitty stop motion, and it's shitty blue screen. Because like the edges are terrible.
yeah, you can really see the
really
matte.
fuzzy. Regardless, Ash blows its fucking head off with a shotgun. And then you have my favorite sequence of the entire movie is the revelation. It's the man from the sky. He saved us. Hail him. And they're all like, yay.
That knight who says that. So there's a
Is it Ted Raimi?
There's a knight. all these knights like in the full helmets, like with the masks down, the metal. You can't see who they are. There's one that kind of like slowly slinks over, kind of down the hill a little bit to the one who's going to say the line. The one who slinks down, that's Ted. The one who opens up his mask and says that line is Sam Raimi.
Is it seriously? Okay, so we have to watch that and The Sweat tonight.
Okay. He says that. Hail, he who has come from the skies to deliver us from the terrors of the Deadites.
And immediately, Ash realizes, oh shit, there's a drawing from thousands of years, or like hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
1300 AD is where we are.
Is of this man in a blue shirt with what looks like a shotgun going off and a chainsaw. And they call him the man who fell from the sky and he was here to save us. And the revelation of like, he's like, no.
It never ends.
No. And he's like freaking the fuck out. This is without a doubt, this is at this point in our journey of doing this, because you got to remember this is the second franchise we watched.
Yeah.
The first franchise we watched was Scream, which is more or less straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Down to earth.
And then we were like, oh, well, Evil Dead is coming out. Let's watch Evil Dead. And by the time we get to 2, I'm like, because The Evil Dead is crazy. Mm-hmm. It's one of it was at the time the craziest thing I'd ever seen until I saw Evil Dead 2,
Right.
Dead by Dawn, which was the craziest thing I had ever seen until... Thanks for tuning into the Third Channel podcast. Please, if you have the time, rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast apps.
You can follow us on social media at Third Channel Podcast, and you can find me online at @DRosenberg.
You can also reach out to us at thirdchannelpodcast@gmail.com, where we check every message we swear. Third Channel is hosted by PJ Minette
And Derek Rosenberg. Theme song and audio engineering by Fly Guy Ty.
The logo designed by Belle DeVelco.
Episode artwork by Nathan Walkington.
Keep it tuned right here to the Third Channel for all things horror. And remember, don't touch that dial. Egg salad and eggs.